Right, we'll get right on to public forum, and our first submitters to public forum are Simon Fogarty and Chris Ford, who will address the meeting concerning Lime scooters. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, David. Afternoon, everybody. My name's Simon Fogarty. I'm a member of the Foundation of the Blind here in Dunedin. And I come to you with concerns about these wonderful e-scooters, Lime scooters, along with my colleague, Chris Ford. Look, as a blind person, the Lime scooter is an absolute, brutally honest, pain in the ass, and every other part of the body. I'm currently getting over a strained back and 2 strained shoulders from tripping over 3 scooters in one place. I'm just, because we've got a short time and Chris needs to speak as well, I'm going to put this simply. You guys need to organise rules and regulations around these things. I believe this is being done, but it's not being done soon enough. Too many people are being injured. They're being left in the middle of footpaths so that people with mobility and other disability-related issues are unable to bypass them, or in my case, even see them before they topple over or we topple over them. They're, as I said, randomly left. They could be geo-fenced into locations all around the city so that they are kept in a safe and secure environment at the end of a trip. How to police that? Geo-fenced. If they're not in that fenced-off area when the trip finishes for the person, they still keep charging the person. The University of Otago currently does the opposite of this. If they are left on the campus area, they are continuing to clock up charges for that person's trip. Until they are taken outside of the campus area, when the trip finishes, the charges stop. They are continually being knocked over, especially by myself. They're unstable, and it's too problematic. You guys have got to come up with some rules. You've got a motor vehicle being driven on a footpath at high speeds, no protection. What's the difference between an e-scooter and a push bike? Okay, someone can tell me that NZTA governs these rules. In my book, doesn't matter. This is Dunedin City. You guys need to come up with the rules for the city. Take the first step. Be the first ones to organise something that sets the standard for the rest of the country. Don't be a follower, be a leader. Hopefully I've made my point, but I'm open to questions if anyone has any. But Chris, would you like to?
Kia ora tātou, Mayor and Councillors. I just wish to follow up on Simon's comments. Disabled Persons Assembly Dunedin welcomes the DCC's commitment to review the mobile trading bylaw as one means of regulating the growing number of e-scooters and micro-mobility vehicles which are coming onto our streets. The growing number of micro-mobility vehicles do have their advantages for non-disabled people, and we wish to stress that we don't wish to see them banned, just fully regulated for safety reasons, as are motor vehicles and other modes of transport. However, they can pose a significant risk, if only partially regulated, as they currently are at the moment, to walking pedestrians, both disabled and non-disabled alike, and those who mobilise, like myself, using wheelchairs, and as well as that, blind and vision impaired people, deaf and hearing impaired people, older people, children, and other pedestrians, etc. It is our intention, it is DPA's intention, to make a submission on this, and we published information in our recent newsletter encouraging people to do so when the time comes. Nevertheless, Disabled Persons Assembly Dunedin wishes to express its disappointment that proper processes weren't followed by the Dunedin City Council or New Zealand Transport Authority or central government when it came to permitting Lime and other e-scooter operators to set up locally and nationally. Better consultation and involvement of all stakeholders at all levels and a better regulatory environment could have avoided some of the pitfalls that Simon has experienced and identified in his unfortunate encounters with Lime scooters. Personally speaking, I found Lime scooters parked in very inconvenient locations around the city. I encountered one just fairly recently, parked on Castle Street. I came out of the therapeutic pool at about 6 p.m. one Friday night. I found this Lime scooter parked slap bang in the middle of the footpath. I took a photo of it even. I was absolutely incredulous that people could be so irresponsible as to do that. But yet this comes about because of a lack of regulation. DPA New Zealand, in our recent submission to the government's Road to Zero draft road safety strategy, stated our belief in the need to fully regulate the use of e-scooters and other micro-mobility vehicles with the introduction, for example, of approved zones for their use, which would be fully geo-fenced, and they're banning from all or at least part of the pedestrian footpath network. This would mean that limes and other micro-mobility vehicles which can travel at above a certain speed should be reclassified as motor vehicles, hence subject to the same rules that apply to motor vehicles. We also believe that all e-scooters and micro-mobility vehicles should also be tested as motor vehicles and approved for safety purposes by NZTA, Standards New Zealand, or another appropriate agency prior to their going on public sale or being offered for hire. Micro-mobility and e-scooter hire providers should also be legally regulated and licensed as well by central government. Riders should also compulsorily have to wear safety equipment, such as pads and helmets. Furthermore, as DPA Dunedin suggested in our submission to the Council on the draft annual plan, line scooter and other micro vehicle providers should be charged a per scooter fee by local authorities such as the DCC to recoup enforcement and other costs, and also pass this on to consumers in order that a sense of hirer or owner responsibility is actually enforced. In saying all this, we recognise that with the current Council's term coming to an end, these issues will be presented to the new Council for its consideration. I expect that if there are councillors who are re-elected at the forthcoming election, this responsibility will fall to you. And to all new and prospective councillors, ears up candidates out there, you will all have the collective responsibility to make our streets and pedestrian routes locally as safe and as accessible as possible within the powers that this council possesses. Mayor.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Simon. Now, you mentioned, Simon, you're happy to take questions. Chris, you happy to take
Yes,
questions?
certainly.
Councillor Benson Pope, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, both of you, for coming along. I guess a lot of us share your views, but I really want an assurance that what you've said today, probably don't need to write another submission, will be submitted to the current processes around mobile trading bylaw and so on, and any further processes that we're involved in. Are you happy to do that again, or we can take it as read that what you said will go into that process?
I hope that it will go in as read into the process.
Okay, but you are happy, both of you, or with your supporters, to make further submissions as part of any other
Absolutely.
examinations that are happening?
Yes.
And your objection is to both the littering of parked vehicles and their use on footpaths?
Plus the fact that they are currently, I believe, currently there is no charges from the council for rental space, shall we put it, for those vehicles on Dunedin city streets.
Right, thank
Yet a retail outlet has to pay for signage or cafe tables. Yeah, I do not believe that is fair.
That's correct. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Chair, Mayor. And thank you for your presentation today. I just actually want to ask a question, and I'm not quite sure if it's of the CEO or Mr. Pickford, but just wondering about the ability at present to geocache, because I just want to explore whether there are certain areas that may be better for if we can implement that, at what level that should be done. Are there special areas that should be? And I know we've got special lighting around the Braille Centre, for example.
To geofence?
Yes.
So at the moment, the university and the Polytech both have a geofencing in place. The university and the Botanic Gardens. You can ride through, but you can't get off and leave your bike there. We are in discussion, leave your scooter there. We are in discussions with Lime about whether you can do that on George Street, for example, on the footpaths. We're not sure if the GPS is fine-grained enough to allow that, but Mr. Pickford is in discussions with Lime. He has fortnightly meetings with Lime, and there's a number of options. As you know, the 15km/h courtesy zone, the voluntary one, has started this week, and there's a number of other things that they're looking at, options to provide space so that the scooters aren't left on the footpaths, for example, although any of those sort of things are voluntary. But so Mr. Pickford is in discussion with Limes about those sort of initiatives.
Excuse me, can I just make another comment that will add to this? Look, currently the scooters we have, and that is nationwide, are extremely unstable. They have what I would call a kickstand from the old days of push bikes. You know, you kick the stand down on the side. It's got something like that on one side of it. But if you knock it the wrong way, it's going to fall over. Somewhat makes it easy to move. As of last week, there was an article on News Hub, TV3 News, that not only is there over 2,500 ACC claims from October last year to the year to date regarding injuries from Lime scooters, there is also a version 3 of the scooter coming out. They are going to be larger, more stable, which I do believe is a good thing, but it also makes them more weighty and harder to move, which means more of a problem on the footpaths, on the roads, for those of us in situations like Chris and myself. Something needs to be done now. And from what I'm hearing so far from Mr. Benson Pope and this other lady, I believe you're in agreement. But I think with the outgoing of members of this council, we need to push this and get it in the pipeline now as soon as we can, because otherwise it's just going to get pushed back. Having been a staff member of the university for 11 years, bureaucracy has a tendency to waylay things. This is a health and safety issue, and that needs to be taken into account as quickly as possible.
But it's also a human rights issue as well,
Yes.
in terms of our ability to mobilise quite freely in the community. Of course, we have to be observant of the rights and responsibilities of each other as pedestrians, but at the same time, I would wish to advise councillors that there has been a forum held by the Auckland City Council in collaboration with the Human Rights Commission on this very issue. And they talked about the issue of pedestrian footpaths as increasingly contested spaces and the impacts that that has on human rights, and particularly on the human rights of disabled people.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? There are none. Simon, Chris, thank you very much.
Very much, folks.
Cheers. Right, our next submitted to public forum is the Seniors Climate Action Network. Donna Peacock will address the meeting on the waterfront development. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou e tēnei ahia ahi. Good afternoon. Ko Donna Peacock tauko ingoa. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Seniors Climate Action Network. On the 25th of June, a great celebration occurred when the DCC declared a climate emergency. We, old and young, who work for a safe future environment, applaud and celebrate that announcement. Local government will be putting mitigation and adaptation at the centre of all planning, development and council operations. In light of this, Seniors Climate Action has great concerns regarding the planned extravagant and unnecessarily grandiose development of the waterfront. This project will not minimise harm to our environment and the people, and furthermore, undertaking more debt or spending from the Provisional Growth Fund could be utilised in many more profitable and equitable ways. In these uncertain times, which pose incredible challenges to all here in Dunedin, it would seem irresponsible to proceed. And uncertain times bring many of our commonly held beliefs into question. We can no longer continue business as usual, based on easy credit, while we try to deal with the well-recognised 10-year opening that involves, according to the IPCC 2018, unprecedented change. The climate emergency announcement will affect long-term planning and spending. Robert Unger, philosopher and politician, states, "At every level, the greatest obstacle to transforming the world is that we lack the clarity and imagination to conceive that it could be different." He also speaks of illusions of false necessity. Scan presents some reasons why the DCC should proceed with a much less ambitious plan. 1. The financing of sea level mitigation. Currently, even the necessary at St Kilda and St Clair beaches is very costly, to say nothing of what will be required in future. 2. The retrenchment housing. This is a huge challenge. 3. Sea level and its effect on the harbour basin itself, along with the continuing maintenance that will be required for such an elaborate structure. 4. The prevailing north-east winds off the sea which sweep up the harbour. 5. Current underground infrastructure replacement and maintenance will be required for the foreseeable future, along with the replacement of expensive and critically threatened major public infrastructure. 6. Establishing a living, citizen-friendly inner city and suburbs, and this is already underway. 7. Financing new electric transport systems, which may involve the provision of overhead recharging units at each bus stop, etc. 8. The provision of necessary and scarce clean water and local food production systems. 9. The carbon footprint involved in such a large and unnecessary facility. 10. The future return of shipping and rail as a major method of travel and transportation of goods. The waterfront may need in the future to be a shared recreational and transit area. 11, and most importantly of all, the future debt laid on the shoulders of our children that could result in monies unavailable for essentials in a time of need. This brings to mind our beautiful, nice to have, yet continually burdensome stadium, originally to have been mostly private funded. What could we have delivered had we not built it? So what then could we do instead? Certainly infinite growth is out of the question, and the waterfront development would appear to be about growth rather than provision of an equitable economy. Normal, as we think of it in our lifetimes, is over. We must employ 7-generation thinking, which refers to the prudent and considered planning for our children 7 generations from now. What would they expect of us at this point in time? Scan now suggests some possibilities for provisional growth funding and any debt that we may wish to incur that could provide local employment and a healthy community to the benefit of all. So council might, 1, plan a simpler style of upgrade for the waterfront with a less extravagant bridge, using the knowledge and skills of our local citizens and businesses already contributing to a sustainable future. Perhaps we could base this on our wild Dunedin theme, which would seem to us to be more appropriate. 2, plan to house those threatened by the sea. Government may well come on board too. However, who is the government but every citizen as a tax and ratepayer? 3, facilitate co-housing and papakaianga builds, such as that in High Street, which share the land and use less of it per family. Scott Willis spoke a month ago, giving some very good ideas on climate-safe housing. 4, upgrade the old Caversham and Winganui tunnels for healthy cycling, scootering and recreational access between Mosgiel suburbs and city. 5, plan for and eventually provide free transport for the main suburbs and city areas. 6, purchase fertile land and initiate education programs in conjunction with Otago Polytech for the purpose of local food production. Recent government announcements just the other week have eased the path for councils in this respect. 7, alter our streets, roads and their berms to provide food, walkable, cyclable connections and community meeting places, also known as bumping places, places where we can meet and chat, which have really disappeared from our society in more recent times. 8, stimulate the local economy with the establishment of a local currency, which would provide strength and sustainability for local manufacturers and locally owned businesses. Scan and probably other groups. Right, I won't be much longer. Scan and other groups will be interested in assisting with this. And finally, 9, provide free entry for all to swimming pools and plan to build suburban indoor gyms and sports centres, gathering places for youth. This is shown to reduce community crime and improve health. Maybe the SDHB might contribute. And finally, it is important for councils to keep in mind that climate-related incidents will not remain at the current level, and so it is incumbent upon council to help build resilient communities strong enough to cope with a different climate world so that our people may withstand and live comfortably within the new world they will experience. And we know that, just as with the Mosgiel pool fundraising, there are many community groups who would engage. We must work together. Spending for the future must not be based on illusions of infinite growth and illusions of false necessity at the expense of equity, democracy, and a safe climate for our young people. Using 7-generation planning, let us face the challenges ahead and provide wise, lasting, and equitable opportunities for all. Our young people are calling for change. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. You're happy to take questions?
Yes.
Questions, councillors? There's no questions. It was a very succinct and... No, that's all right. You're right. Thank you.
Worship, I just move the extension of time for...
Right. Second to Councillor Wilson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. Can I now invite Anne-Marie Parsons to the chair, she's going to speak about the Inner City Bus Hub. Welcome.
As I left the house, I realised when I got in the bus that I'd left all my notes behind. So I've just had to write them again.
Right, the next 5 minutes are yours.
After looking at a crowd waiting for a bus in the rain, I rang the City Council to start with, told that they had nothing to do with it. This is referring to the to Hub K. I wanted the mayor to talk to me, but was told he had nothing to do with it. Even though I said, surely he cares what tourists think of the city and how they are looked after. I then called regional council every day for a week and finally spoke to someone in transport who was able to change the regionals. We won't be doing anything. And I met him and a chap from the DCC as well at the site, and they were talking about what they were going to do. It would take a long time because they had to talk to contractors and get the equipment and stuff together. And of course the weather would get in the way of the workers as well, getting the work done. At that point I explained that the people in the buses travel every day. The buses travel every day, so there are hundreds of people that are going to get wet if it rains, and they've just got to stand there. Now, you've got this picture, all of you. The lady second from the left is Linda, who comes from Melbourne. I was met at the Hub K by 2 journalists and a cameraman. I had prayed for rain, and it did. So I got wet as well as everybody else, but I wanted it to know what it felt like. I spoke to Linda. She's the one second from the left, side on. From Melbourne, who was just... sorry, my glasses are funny at the moment as well, who was not at all pleased, in fact quite angry, as she had to open her case in the rain to get her warm coat. So everything in the case got wet, and she wasn't happy to be all that way to Invercargill wet in the hours that it took her to get to Invercargill. She wasn't looking forward to getting on the bus. Just a side note here, I do a lot of collecting as I can no longer give since I've retired, but was collecting some years ago outside Starbucks coffee. Only an hour, but a nasty cold day. I was chilled to the bone. Got home, I had a car in those days, put the electric blanket on and got into the bed, clothes and all, to actually get warmed up again. Now that's what people are feeling when they're standing in the rain and and the wind, the cold wind, because I have done it myself so often. I go to Christchurch as I have family up there, and recently was going often to see a cousin who was dying, and then coming back. And I know what it's like to wait for the bus at both ends of the trip. I also catch the Queenstown bus. My family live in Miller's Flat. So I get out at Miller's Flat and I have 7 hours with my daughter, grandson and great-grandchildren, and I can catch up with all of them during that time and then catch that night bus back to Dunedin. So at both ends of that trip, I don't like it because then I have to get out, find a taxi, well, a bus if I'm lucky, to get home now that I don't use a car. Sorry, I've got these all over the place. And so many people will get cold and wet as it turned out. This is after the day that I was with those councillors, both from regional council and the city council. Now, an older person of my age could get wet and cold and pneumonia and die. And who's going to get blamed for that? Is it going to be the mayor? Is it the city? Is it going to be the bus company? Or is it all of us? And it does happen. I have a solution. And it's very straightforward, and nobody has to do anything, and it won't cost any money at all. Let's get Intercity to use the one-way system outside Centre City New World. There's a huge line of seats, there's verandas, and inside there's a phone to call a taxi, and through the supermarket, there are public toilets inside Centre City. Nobody has to build anything, do anything, just use it. And if you're coming in from the north, you go round the block and come in there. And they do that already. They go round a block and pick up students at the university. So it would mean, I'm still waiting to see something happening down there. I go most days. One night, I went down after being told by Intercity head office that they were using it at night. In the evening when they were coming in, they were using the Centre City New World. So I just decided I'd prove it, one way or the other. And I waited for the 10 to 8 bus. Of course, it came into Hub K. It was a very grumpy driver that day, and he wouldn't say much to me, but the people on the bus were not happy, landing up in the middle of nothing. And the next bus, I waited another hour and got the 10 to 9. And the bus driver was definitely on my side. He said he'd been trying for months and months to get something done about it, that it was just not good enough, and they're embarrassed because they have to pull in there and get people out into nothing as well. So the solution is to use the Centre City New World that we used to use. There's only 3 buses that use it now. 1 that goes to Palmerston, 14 that goes to Port Chalmers, and 37 that goes Concord to the university, and it only goes one way that way. So there's plenty of room and no clashes and no extra cost to anybody, just do it. And then all of us would be happy.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Are you happy to take questions?
Sure.
Questions. Councillor Hawkins.
Your Worship. Kia ora, Anne-Marie. Is it your understanding that the obstacle to doing that is that the routes that the intercity buses are using have to be registered with the regional council? Or is it that the operator themselves aren't amenable? Or do you know what the hurdle is?
It seems to be Intercity is just not amenable. The regional council is on my side as well. It's very hard to know what people are really thinking. I'm just nobody from nothing. I don't represent anybody except all of the people of the city, which is quite a thing to do. I really don't know, but I think it's the Intercity people that are just being ridiculous.
And the issue is primarily that the operators expect their passengers to arrive a considerable amount of time before their bus leaves, as opposed to the commuter buses where you can just turn up and grab the bus.
Yes, and I did explain to them that if they're worried about people getting left behind because they can't change the story. But of course, you've got to phone or email or text or something to book your seat. So then you get told then where you're going to be catching the bus and where it's going to be dropping you off. I can't see any problems at all.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't imagine that anyone disagrees with what Ms Parsons is saying. And I'm wondering if the Chief Executive there's obviously been some toing and froing here and some discussions. I wonder if the Chief Executive would give us an update on what the situation is, please.
The Connecting Dunedin group, which is the 3-way partnership between us, the Regional Council and NZTA, have discussed this issue, and I can confirm you're right, the ORC, it is a priority for them, it is their piece of work, and both us and the NZTA are pretty supportive about trying to get it resolved. So I know they're working on it and kind of keeping us informed.
Can I just answer that? What they've got planned sounds to be like something that would seat maybe 6 to 8 people with shelter. There can be 20 people standing there. Where are the others going to? Are they just going to stay in the rain? Or do we go to Centre City New World? And there's this huge seating area there. Everybody could have a seat and shelter, and the others don't have to do anything at all.
Mr. Gary.
Thank you, Ms Parsons, for coming in, and I just wanted to say you're not nobody. You're you, and you're making a really good point to us. I just wanted to ask you, are you making the same presentation to the ORC?
Yes, I'm dealing with them. I haven't done this exact. Somebody said that it's a council meeting just a few days after we met, and they said put that down. I'm going to do them as well.
Lovely, thank you very much.
But I have been in touch, and I've got somebody there that I can talk to.
But my question was, are you going to do this presentation to them at
Oh
a
yes,
meeting?
of course, of
Yep,
course.
lovely, thank you.
But I don't know when their next meeting is going to be.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks very much, Emery. I think what you've really highlighted here too is the fact that you've got Intercity, ORC, DCC, all different authorities running around at this point. And so Councillor Benson Pope and the Chief brought up connecting Dunedin. Would you like that even brought up a little bit more specific to, and also say potentially that we talk to Intercity as well and ask them in the whole mix of how we could design this, would they be willing to move that, and maybe how does that fit with the design with the ORC's perception of using where the intercity bus stop should be?
Well, when I spoke to a manager, and I was, I've had a concussion, and I don't always think of the right things until it's too late. They assured me that they were using the Centre City New World for their evening buses. And I really didn't believe them. So that's why I went down. It's quite a hoo-ha when you've got to catch buses, but I do enjoy buses now, and I'm glad I'm not driving. The way people drive in Dunedin is appalling. But they lied to me on the phone about what they were doing. So I think they just need to get told what they're going to do.
Or we can all get in the room at the same time and make sure we're all speaking at the same time to each other,
Or
because sometimes
something,
that
yes.
is where it lies.
Yeah.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Worship. And thank you, Mr. Parsons. Just a question for the Chief. We've got a number of old bus shelters at Tahuna Park, do we not?
I think that's right, the old ones.
Yeah. Is there not a chance that we could actually temporarily put them in there, because this is a pressing issue in the sense of trying to do something now and then let process take through, but...
On the footpath outside Intercity? We'd have to have a look. Generally, there's pretty tight rules about how deep they are and whether they fit on the footpath, and you can't put them on the road. And so it's important that we don't end up solving something that is somebody else's issue. This is the ORC are working on this. We are supporting them. NZTA are supporting them. We'll keep the pressure on through the governance process, through Connecting Dunedin. But I think it's important that we let the people who are responsible for sorting it do their job, and we offer support. So we'll offer some options. We'll make sure they know we've got. They certainly know we've got old bus stops.
And let them know that there's a solution that could actually be put into action relatively quickly.
Well, I don't know if there is, but it's one that maybe can be looked at amongst others.
Well, among other things, Ms Parsons has pointed out that there's already a veranda there. That's the point. Right, is there any more questions? There are none. Ms Parsons, thank you very much.
But just say that maybe you could all go down and have a look and see what is at Centre City New World, and they would love the people going in and shopping in between trips, I'm sure.
Thank you. Now, can I invite Quentin Blair up for public forum? He wants to address the meeting on the water supply to 309 Portobello Road. Welcome.
Kia ora, and thank you for inviting me along. I feel a little bit selfish actually sitting up here and talking to you all after people talking about pretty wide-ranging issues involving the greater community. However, I stand in front of you talking about just my house. And more specifically, just the house to, just the water to my house. I come and talk to you pretty much as a last chance saloon. I have applied to the DCC for basically town supply to my rural property. The water that we require is pretty much dictated by the fact that I've 5 people living in my house. I've done everything to increase the catchment of my roof based on the building guidelines, and I've also investigated trying to get bigger tanks, so bigger holding capacity. Where I live at 309 Portobello Road also has historical slips. One of the significant factors in getting bigger water is the weight that puts on the ground, essentially. So I'm here to ask for permission, and it's been sort of submitted that my application need be declined, purely for the fact that, well, there's numerous elements, but one is that a precedent has been set if this is to be approved. However, I submit that the precedent has already been set. Pretty much every property around mine is already connected to the City Council water supply. However, these were done, I use the term loosely, but illegally, and then subsequently they have been approved by the City Council as existing connections. However, I asked for something in permission and not asking for forgiveness, as many of these other connections do. So these retrospective applications are quite different, and I'm requesting of additional infrastructure at essentially the most economic time when the resurfacing of Portobello Road is ongoing. So I feel like this is in not only my family's best interests for me applying for this, but also to talk to you, as the increase of infrastructure along Portobello Road will allow for a far more consistent infrastructure that isn't essentially ad hoc connections that are unreliable. So I'm asking for reliable infrastructure to be placed, and I'm not relying on my catchment, which is pretty much dictated by the inconsistent weather patterns throughout Dunedin, which are becoming even more inconsistent, and not relying on companies who hold consent to deliver water out to my place. So essentially, that water, when I pay for rural delivery to come out and put water into my tanks, it's still coming out of this city's water supply. So essentially, I'm just asking for infrastructure to be put in place so that we're not relying on those consent holders to essentially take the same water that I'm asking access to. So in saying that, I submit that my application be approved based on essentially my family's needs in what is the most economic time for us to place infrastructure down the road. I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you, Quentin. Are you happy to take questions?
Oh, always. Yeah,
Sure. Councillor Benson-Pogue.
Just one, thank you. In the report, the statement is made that you're not connected to the wastewater supply. That's correct too?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Quentin. Just picking up on your point around the retrospectively approved connections in and around your place. So the connection zone, if you like, ends at 298. Are you telling me that all the others between there and your place, 304, 307, 311, etc., are all connected to the town supply?
Actually, quite glad you asked, because it's been noted that I have an extraordinary application. So it's an extraordinary. However, I feel like I'm extraordinary purely based on the fact that I am the only one in that pocket that isn't connected. So yes. Simple fact is every house around me is connected to the City Council supply in one way or another.
One way or another, I mean, are there different ways of being connected to the town supply?
So, I mean, without trying to vilify any of my neighbours, well, we all know, well, I assume everyone knows that there's been well publicised connections that go even beyond my property to Chalice Point, where the vast majority of houses have that connection. And I mean in some way or another, as in I am aware that people have filled their tanks through hoses from properties that adjoin the thing through to actual connections put in by plumbers when they're doing work and then retrospectively applied for consent.
Thank you. And are you aware of those, because there was a significant piece of work around what we like to call legacy issues where a number of these were formalised, but are you saying that some of these have happened since then?
It is my understanding that some have, yes.
Any further questions? Councillor Lord.
I was going to ask the question, do you have the option just for filling the hose from a neighbour's place instead of filling your tank?
I do,
I'm not saying it's a preferred option.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot cheaper than the truck.
Yeah, oh, of course. I mean, but in saying that, that's so the neighbour that I would ask their permission to fill from their tank, they have a retrospective connection to the town supply. So I'm essentially asking for the infrastructure. I mean, there's multiple ways that I could possibly get water, but they are not probably the best way to obtain that water. And again, like if I have the infrastructure there, I can be that be put into my rates. Whereas if I'm taking it from a neighbour, essentially I'm taking from the system, and there's no way of the City Council of that being equitable.
We've got a report in front of us that suggests that the cost could be in the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you're thinking different to that, or?
So I have approached Fulton Hogan, and they did not suggest hundreds of thousands of dollars when I initially spoke to them. I've spoke to KB Contracting in regards to getting drilling down the side. Obviously trenching is the preferred option, and again, everything that came back said the most opportune time is pretty much right now, as they are resurfacing Portobello Road, which makes the cost significantly cheaper, because one of the greatest costs is obviously your traffic management, which is already in place. So,
Any further questions? Councillor Laufiso.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Blair. I just noted in your letter to us ahead of this meeting, you talked about contacting the council over the last 7 years. So is that how long you've had the property out at Portobello?
So I shifted in with my now wife 14 years ago. And indeed, since then, I've increased the catchment size. So I've been sort of intermittently contacting the City Council and talking on the phone. There has been no formal application because I was under the impression that the water boundaries were being considered in the not too distant future. However, with the opportunity of the road widening of Portobello Road, now was the perfect time to apply. Yeah.
No further questions? Mr. Blair, thank you.
Thank you all.